All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Shield, and this is Finding the Guardian of Your Soul. We are so lucky to have a very esteemed guest today, Dr. Larry Fan. I am so excited. Larry, it's great to have you. I'm going to read your bio so everybody can get a sense of who you are. Dr. Larry Fan, a Harvard-educated award-winning plastic surgeon, is the founder of 77 Plastic Surgery in San Francisco, known for his never overdone aesthetic. He's positively impacted over 10,000 lives across his 2-decade-long career. He's recognized as one of America's top plastic surgeons and is the pioneer of medical beauty, an approach focusing on inner health and outer beauty. His path was shaped by personal experience with reconstructive surgery after a basketball accident. This spurred his passion for enhancing others' confidence through plastic surgery. He further honed his skills with a fellowship in Shanghai, China, and a body contouring preceptorship in Pittsburgh. An accomplished scientist, he's frequently featured on international media platforms and practices a range of aesthetic surgery. His mission: to help 1 million people feel beautiful inside and out. As the world's first medical beauty specialist, he underscores that true beauty extends beyond mere appearances. Dr. Fan's work embodies his belief in the power of integrated care, proving that beauty truly is more than skin deep. Dr. Larry, it is a pleasure to have you here. Did we miss anything, or was that?
That was great. Thanks so much, Lisa. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to meet all of you listening.
Yes. And I would love for you to tell everybody you had a basketball accident that led you to want to become a plastic surgeon.
Yep. Exactly. So when I was 21, I still play basketball to this day. It's been something near and dear to me. And, as it happens during sports, I was just literally going to the basket, if anyone plays basketball, and felt a big crack across my face. And, after that, a fair amount of blood, but that's normal. And I don't want to get too graphic, but, essentially, I'd broken my nose was broken, and it's something that happens all the time playing sports. So it wasn't actually a big deal sort of to me at first. And, I went on and healed, so to speak. But what ended up happening was, over time, my broken nose, it literally started moving across my face. At first it was just a tiny bit, and then it was a little bit more, and then it was a little bit more. And then after a while, it ended up where my nose was literally sitting under my, like almost under my eye. It looked like one of those boxers that had gotten, hit too many times. So it began to look very, very, funky. And, I was never someone who was really that oriented to the way I looked, but it became severe enough that, people started saying things to me, and then I started seeing it myself, and eventually it began to make me feel really self-conscious. Like I literally felt like I would go into a restaurant, for example, and I felt like people were, if they would see me, they'd be like, "Hey, what's wrong with that guy?" And so, it literally began to make me feel a little bit ugly and deformed, and I started hiding out a little bit, and I started wearing fake eyeglasses, and I started growing my hair out and things to try to stop to hide it. And so it really began to affect me. And then at some point, naturally, I began to think about, well, gosh, maybe I need to do something about this. And so I thought about having surgery, but surgery is a scary concept, for anybody. And even as a surgeon, if, I've had to have surgery, it's not like I say, hey, please sign me up. And so at the time, I really, really thought, my God, do I really want to do that? What happens if something goes wrong? What happens if there's a problem? What happens if I just don't like it, And so I kind of stewed on it for a little while. But what ended up changing things for me was, one day I was sitting at a park with the woman who'd end up becoming my wife, and we were literally like looking over the cityscape, and we were talking about our future and about, hey, maybe we want to have a family and all these things. And it kind of dawned on me. I realized in thinking about the future that I realized, you know what, I can't live this way like for the rest of my life. I don't want to live this way the rest of my life. So I finally mustered up the courage to go get some help, and I ended up, finding a really, really good surgeon and got my nose fixed. And, the recovery, there's a little bit something to go through, but I'm lucky that everything ended up okay. I'm no supermodel, but I feel like I look normal. And so going through that experience of just really, being unhappy with my appearance, feeling ugly, honestly, feeling ugly and getting help, and doing that, that's a big part of what inspired me to become a plastic surgeon.
Wow. Wow. What a story and what a journey. That's amazing. So you decided to become, and you knew when you went to medical school, you were this is what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, my audience is mostly women, and they have a lot of uh, issues with their looks. There's so much pressure on women to be beautiful, to look like a Kardashian, and we learn this at a very, very, very early age, even in a era where, we are so modernized and women have so many
Yeah.
opportunities. The emphasis on looks is awful for so many of us. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. And so, first, I absolutely understand that and see that and completely agree with you that there is so much pressure on women of all ages to look a certain way. And I think it's honestly, I think it's actually terrible that society, gives these messages to people. What I would say to, what I like to say to every woman, including my own daughter, the first thing is, I think everybody is beautiful just the way they are. And I encourage everybody to really just recognize that and honor it, and ultimately to love yourself. We all have imperfections. That's part of what makes us beautiful. And I think that's something that everyone needs to hear. We are all beautiful. On the flip side, there's nothing wrong with, wanting to be your best with whatever is important to you. But at the end of the day, everybody's beautiful, and we all deserve to set our own standards for what we want for ourselves. And society, we shouldn't allow society to sort of tell us like who we should be or what we should look like, or whether we decide to do something for ourselves or not.
And Dr. Larry, one of the concerns that I see is so many younger women. They see some of the Kardashian women and how much work they've had done. And some of them started very, very early, radically changing their physical
Yeah.
appearance.
Yeah.
What would you do if a young woman came to you and said, I want to have plastic surgery, I want to look like a Kardashian?
Well, the first thing is, every person that's thinking about having something done, it's important for them, first to be in a stage of life, in a condition where they're able to sort of make decisions for themselves. And if somebody is a minor, for example, a teenager, for example, there are some select circumstances where if somebody is born with what really is a congenital deformity, or they've got something like, for example, like very large ears, and that's causing social issues. There are certainly situations where it is actually very appropriate and also very helpful for people to get help when they're young. But otherwise, most young patients, for example, I will, counsel them like, hey, first thing, it's really important that you need to be sort of old enough and mature enough to really, understand what it is that's important for you, what really is involved with the possibility of going through something like surgery, and just see whether they're in a position to be able to make sense for themselves. When I see women, even who are over 18, they're technically adults, but even if they're in their early 20s, I personally, have a conversation that, when you're young, there's so many things that people are going through. You're figuring out who you are, your body's changing, your interests are changing. And I encourage people to wait until they're old enough, mature enough to really know who, to have their own identity, to know what's important to themselves, so that when they're making any choices, it is from a place of empowerment, a place of certainty, a place of confidence, a place of making a long-term decision. And sometimes it takes us a little bit of time before we realize either, yes, this is really important to me, it's really going to help me, or conversely, it's okay. It may not be perfect, but I don't need to do anything. And ultimately, I think it's important for people just to be thoughtful, to be informed, but also to have a long-term perspective on things.
And also probably, I'm guessing, to look at some of the underlying reasons, psychological reasons, body image reasons why somebody wants to do that at such an early age. I actually had true confessions. I had rhinoplasty when I was very young. I think I was 15 or 16 years old. And I am Jewish, and, we had the quintessential Jewish nose. And so it was sort of just expected in my family that we were going to have plastic surgery, that we were going to have that fixed. And I didn't even think twice about it. What would you have said to me at that age? Or would you have just said, this isn't a major alteration? If it's a minor thing, would you have done that? Or would it have been something you would have referred to someone
It's
else?
absolutely, it requires a layered discussion. So the first part is understanding what really is motivating sort of the desire for change. Also, what is the actual desired change? And with young people particularly, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, certainly somebody with an ethnic feature that's very strong, and or a feature that is maybe a little bit, makes people stand out in a not positive way. Those can be appropriate reasons for someone to have cosmetic surgery, for example, but it requires someone to also be mature enough to really understand what's involved with going through surgery. Can they handle the prospect of going through a procedure that's going to require, some discomfort, some recovery, some uncertainty? Do they understand, what the potential results can be like in both, what's desired, but also understanding there's a spectrum of results, and, and are they, do they have realistic sort of expectations? And then also understanding, do they truly want this for themselves for the long term? And when you're, a teenager, for example, it actually can become very nuanced to really tease those things out. It also requires a discussion with parents and ultimately with someone who's young. Personally, I often will refer people to see a psychologist to unpack some of those issues. And if it turns out that I think they've got sort of a realistic, a good reason for wanting to do things, a realistic sort of expectation, they're in good health, they can handle sort of going through the whole process, they are comfortable knowing that there are some risks. And if a psychologist feels like, they do have the appropriate maturity to make these kinds of decisions, to understand all of these things, and if the parents are also sort of supportive and able to provide support, then there's potential to be able to do something. But if any of those things are missing, those are red flags that would, make us, would give pause.
It's funny. There was no discussion. I think we just went, made the appointment, we did it. So, so let's talk about women who are aging, women who are getting older, women in, their 50s, 60s, 70s. What about plastic surgery as we get older? And especially, I think the biggest thing is, a lot of younger women do breast implants and things like that. So that's one piece, is that, and that's something that you do as well, right? Breast
Yeah,
augmentation.
it's one of the very most popular procedures in the entire world. So it is something very, very common.
And has it gotten safer?
So it has gotten safer. All of, cosmetic surgery, and for that matter, a lot in medicine and surgery over time, it continues to get better and better, with better results, less invasiveness, also with, sort of enhanced safety. Yeah, and at the same time, there was inherently with any surgery, there is still, real recovery. There is still some element of risk. And so, it is never going to be, perfect or guaranteed. Um,
Mhm.
Aggregate, compared particularly to like 30 years ago, for example, with breast augmentation, the technologies, the materials, sort of understanding everything has gotten much, much better. The same thing with, with facial cosmetic surgery, also with body contouring. And then on top of it, there's a whole host of, non-surgical or non-invasive treatments that now, can help, and also minimally invasive treatments that can also help. They've all got ways that they can help. They've all also got sort of, limitations as well. But so there are a whole host of things that compared to like when I was, I guess a child, for example, things have gotten a whole lot better.
Wow. And body contouring, tell me about that.
So body contouring, obviously, there are a lot of women that have had children, and having children can have can cause many changes in the body, some of which are maybe not truly welcome. Things get stretched out. A lot of women end up carrying a little bit more weight, and accumulate a little bit more body fat, and things begin to sort of stretch and sag and fall. Um, on top of that, there are people that haven't had children that just, either were born with certain body proportions that maybe don't serve them well. A lot of people end up, having a little bit of extra fat that they'd love to lose. And some people would like to just get their physiques more sort of sculpted and enhanced. And so those things are all very popular things to reduce body fat, things to tighten up sagging skin, things to enhance the overall body proportions. So liposuction, tummy tucks, fat transfers and Brazilian butt lifts, and those kinds of things, all very popular. And then there's another category we're seeing more and more people that used to be a little bit overweight. Maybe they've lost a significant amount of weight, and many of those people are ending up with extra skin all around, and there isn't any amount of working out that can help with that. So having lift procedures to remove that extra skin, that's also, something that's becoming more and more popular.
And what is the number one procedure that you do?
So the number one procedure that I do, it is breast enhancement, and then also liposuction and tummy tucks. And
Mhm.
then third is sort of facial cosmetic work, and that's neck lifts and facelifts and eye lifts. Those
Mhm.
really are the top three things.
And I'm curious, let's say a woman needed, both, like she was at a place where she needed a neck lift and
Yeah.
a facelift. Would you do both of those things at the same time, or do you do them separately?
Yeah. So, it depends on the patient, but in general, aging tends to happen, sort of everywhere. So it's rare for just to be in one place. If someone does have significant sort of sagging, for example, of the cheeks and jawline as well as the neck, it would be most common to do them together. There can be some situations where we might separate things out, but for most patients, typically, at least in pretty good health, it's usually easiest to do everything together because you get one sort of anesthesia, one recovery. But at the same time, with all of this, safety always comes first. So the first consideration with anything is we need to make sure that people are in suitable health to be able to have any procedure.
And I know that there are some unexpected things, because I've talked to girlfriends who have had facelifts,
Yeah.
and even my husband had some work done, and he had what I hear most often is some nerve pain that's unexpected, where you get a lot of you can get shooting pains, or he
Yeah.
had a nerve pain down his leg. from
Yeah.
his surgery, though, and you don't hear about that until, yeah, a lot of times until somebody's actually experiencing it. But is that a common thing that happens with those surgeries?
So it is. So here's what I tell everybody. So, with any procedure, the first thing is there's going to be some recovery involved. There's also going to be some side effects. So first thing everyone's wondering, well, how much is it going to hurt? And, the honest answer is it's going to just depend on the person. It's going to depend on how much is done. It's going to depend on, where the work is done. For most people, fortunately, at least a lot of my patients tell me it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Most people, there is some discomfort though. Certain procedures like tummy tucks hurt a lot for most women, but most it's mild to moderate and it's manageable. On top of that, there are going to be some temporary side effects. So if it's surgery, there's going to be bruising and swelling. There's going to be numbness, tingling, tightness, and all sorts of funny feelings. And that's where, sort of some of these nerve type symptoms, it is common for there temporarily to be some element of it. Most people, it feels like at first there's maybe some pain for a couple of days. Along with that, there's some tightness and soreness and numbness. Some people do have the issues with like shooting pains and those kinds of things. Fortunately, most people, it's actually pretty mild and not a big deal, but there's some people where it is a bigger part of the experience. But the other thing I tell everybody is the good news is no matter how easy or how hard it is going to be temporary and we'll get through it. And one of the things that a lot of my patients can relate to, it's a little bit like, having a child. That's hard in the body. It's a tough process, but there's a real purpose. And at the end, there's a real reward. And so what do? We just sort of get through it. We know it's not forever. And if it's important enough to you, just realize, you know what, there's a process involved with it. It's not quite as fast or quite as easy as we want it to be. We wish it could be just snap a button and it's all done, but we'll get through it and we'll get to the other side. And rewards of that for the right people, that's something that, but it actually gives you can be priceless.
And are there some women who can just get by their whole lives using fillers and using Botox? Or does there just become a point where those things don't work anymore and you have to make that bigger decision if you
So
want?
that is a great question. So first thing I'll say, I don't think anybody needs any of these things, whether it's surgery or Botox or fillers, et cetera. At the same time, these things can be incredibly helpful. And there's a reason why so many women as well as men are getting these things done, because they really can help you look better. When it comes to Botox and fillers, they have a place for everybody, but there absolutely is a limit to how much they can do. And it is really important to recognize like where those limits are. And one of the things that's, I preach is that, medical spas can be a wonderful place to get pampered, to get some lighter treatments. And I have a lot of friends in medical spas, and I don't want to bash medical spas, but at the same time, there's a big inherent flaw. The only thing medical spas have are these non-surgical treatments, injections, lasers, etc. And many medical spas either don't know like where the limits are, but they also don't have any other tools. So when someone walks in, they're incentivized to say like, you're a great candidate for Botox. But what ends up happening is there are a lot of older patients, when you have more advanced signs of aging, like there's a place, Botox and fillers and lasers for that matter, they can help with certain parts of the aging. But there are other parts, particularly with the sagging skin, where it can't help. And and sometimes people will say, oh, you get some filler, do a little bit of lifting. That's not actually true. And so what ends up happening, I see a lot of people who often are treated at medical spas, they walk out getting too much Botox, too much fillers, and they end up looking just really strange. And they look very bloated. And sometimes there's some high profile, like Madonna, for example. Recently, there's some photos that appeared in social media where she looked very unusual, but very, very overfilled. And there's that pitfall if you're trying to compensate for sagging and aging with Botox and fillers, you end up looking really, really odd. And I personally don't want that for everybody. There are some people maybe that actually like that kind of look, but I don't know too many people who do. So that means when you get older, it is really important to understand, okay, maybe if I want more help, I need to consider some other types of treatments like surgery. And that's why, in my opinion, I think getting even your injections from a surgeon is actually really important. You want someone who's got a full spectrum of tools so that they can really make sure you're getting the right treatments and the right amounts at the right time. But when there's sort of a limit, they're going to be able to tell you like, hey, we can't do more of this because these things are going to happen. And if we want to do more, we need to think about these other solutions.
Mm. And at what age, I'm sure, I'm guessing it differs, but they used to say that there were certain ages where if you're going to get a facelift,
Yeah.
that you should do it by that age because the healing is faster. You're going to, your
Yeah.
skin is still better shape and all. Is that still true, Dr. Larry, that you would?
Yeah. So one of the most common questions people ask is like, well, when should I do this, or when should I get a facelift, or when should I get a procedure? And there isn't a black or white answer like this is absolutely the ideal age. What I tell people is, number one, if you have a problem like that you're not happy with it and it bothers you enough to be willing to get help, that's probably an appropriate time to get help, provided you understand, okay, what does the help involve and what kind of result can be expected, and that all sort of lines up. When it comes to something like a facelift, for example, there are some women that I call high achievers that maybe they're aging a little bit earlier than most, but also maybe they want to really, really look really good all the time, that can be getting facelifts as early as their late 30s. That's an extremely on the young side and not what we would recommend for the vast majority of women or men for that matter. With facelifts particularly, most women will be getting facelifts typically in their 50s and 60s when there's enough sort of advanced signs of aging that the idea of lifting things up is going to have that, wow, I look 5, 10, 15 years younger. But there are some women in their 40s that either, if they're aging a little bit earlier than most and or they've got enough sort of sagging that they're like, you know what, I really do want to sort of have that firmer, more youthful look, that will get things earlier. Then on the other side, it is true that for safety matters, and so the older you get, your ability to heal and the occurrence of health problems is a little bit more. So there's a little bit more risk, but there are people as old as their 70s and even occasionally their 80s that will have surgery done. You need to be in good health. But I will tell people you typically don't want to wait that long, at least for your first facelift, because the prime of your life is, whatever age we're at now. And typically, if we're at that age where we see there's a problem, better to be able to get the help, enjoy all those years versus waiting until it's so bad that, that you're like, well, gosh, I missed out because I was living the 10 years I waited living, not feeling great. So.
Yeah. And so what is the healing time normally? Like, let's say you had, I think most of my clients would be looking at facelifts, neck lifts, and things like that.
Yeah.
What would be the healing time on that?
So the healing time depends on, the individual, depends on what kind of treatment, also depends on the extent of treatment. And so there are different techniques for things. But in general, with a face and neck lift, for example, most people will end up with a social downtime of being a combination of bruised and swollen, also numb, tingly, and tight. Most people, it's about 3 to 4 weeks. After that 3 to 4 weeks, people are able to be out and about with makeup still covering up, still a little bit of swelling, also definitely still feeling a little bit funny.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the most common sort of what I'd say the recovery time is.
Mm-hmm. And what is if you can share, like the broad spectrum kind of cost of doing a facelift today? Like, what would most people be looking at? Most women.
So, when it comes to cost, there is also a range of price points that are available. And, I'll phrase it, this way. So you can actually volunteer and get your surgery almost for free if you're willing to volunteer and let trainees work on you. So that's one extreme. On the other extreme, I have some colleagues that are that are very well regarded, and do excellent work generally, and they can cost as much as $500,000, and then everything in between. The average cost for good, actually, the average cost for a good facelift, then that when I say good facelift, I mean a very good surgeon that has a lot of experience doing facelifts, and is known to do an excellent job at facelifts. Typically we'll have a cost range of anywhere from $30,000 to like $100,000. And yet, one thing that I think is also important, to talk about, a lot of people, naturally wonder, well, what procedure do I need or what treatment do I need? And that's an important part of the equation. But what's even more important is the who, like the how matter. We all want to know the how, but the who is even more important. And the biggest sort of element, or that a woman can make a choice to help them get sort of a good result, and also to maximize or minimize the risk, it is picking a really good surgeon.
And
And
how
that's,
do you
yeah,
pick a good surgeon?
a great question. It isn't necessarily a completely easy thing, but the foundations of picking a good surgeon: number one, they need to have the right sort of education, training, and experience. And so when it comes to cosmetic surgery, it's actually so loosely regulated that any doctor can call themselves a cosmetic surgeon, and they can operate on somebody in their office as long as a patient's willing to say, "Hey, I'm going to allow you to cut me open." Um, it's legal. So there are a group of doctors that call themselves cosmetic surgeons, but they might have trained as like an emergency room doctor or an internist, and they just decided for whatever reason they wanted to learn cosmetic surgery. And so those, surgeons I typically would be very cautious about going to, because they don't have the years and the decades and the thousands of cases of experience and training the way, board certified plastic surgeons do, for example. So first minimum requirement, finding a board certified plastic surgeon. That means people have gone through a 5 to 8 year like training program, having done thousands of cases, having gone through a lot of rigorous testing, including oral examinations and reviews of the cases they've done by senior plastic surgeons. So there's actually a pretty high bar just to become a board certified plastic surgeon. But then on top of that, even within board certified plastic surgeons, there are, most surgeons are capable. There are some that frankly are probably not very good. There's some that are really, really, really excellent. And, you know, if I have a choice in picking a surgeon, I want to find a really excellent surgeon. That means in addition to being board certified, you want them to have a lot of experience treating the problem that you have. If you feel like, hey, I need a facelift, someone who's done and does a lot of facelifts. And then you want them to make sure they have a good reputation. And you can certainly check for online reviews and testimonials, ask friends and colleagues. But the one thing that probably makes the biggest difference is actually looking very closely at their results. And so most plastic surgeons will have some type of photo gallery that shows before and afters of various cases. And if you look at them closely, you can see there are different levels of results. The best results are cases where people clearly look much, much better, but they also look very natural and very appealing, where there isn't any obvious sign. It doesn't look like they've had surgery. That's the highest level of surgery, when people look better, but it's actually undetectable. And we've all seen a lot of plastic surgery that clearly is not that, where sometimes it frankly looks really bad. A lot of times it looks better, but still looks a little bit funny. But if you really look closely, you can see differences in the levels of people's results. And that's the biggest tip I would suggest, is study those carefully and ask yourself, does this look truly like beautiful, like a work of art? Or does it just look, it looks better, but still looks a little bit funny, and that's the difference between like great and like, okay.
Can I ask, I know when, for example, back in my mother's day or my grandmother's day, when they were doing facelifts, they used to cut they would cut the face and then there would be scarring. right? Or where
Yeah.
like that you would have to wear a hairstyle that would actually cover, correct, am I correct? That would cover. What do they do today now? Because I know it's invisible, right? You
Yeah.
don't see it.
Yeah, the
What,
scar
yeah,
with faceless necklace today, typically the scars are, imperceptible. And so there are certain scars that are made around the ears and behind the ears that are placed in sort of hidden locations. And then in the old days, to lift the forehead, the traditional approach was cutting all the way across the top or right in the hairline, and that had more tendency to lead to some visibility. But today, we're doing more minimally invasive procedures where we're not necessarily having to make as an extensive a cut. And we're also placing the scars in more hidden locations, and also, doing the surgery just more carefully, where there's a lot of attention paid to how we do the closure, and also making sure that we're minimizing sort of the stress on the wound to help with healing. And so all of those things together mean that the scars tend to be, much more imperceptible. And yet at the same time, your hairstylist, somebody looking closely, they can potentially see something, and also it still depends on the individual. Most people, the face and neck particularly, generally heal pretty well, but but some people can heal even better than others.
and what about, I'm switching a little bit here, but what about some of the procedures that involve like trying to stimulate collagen reproduction, like
Yeah.
microneedling and things like
Mhm.
that?
Yeah.
Do you recommend those, and do they work?
Yeah. So absolutely. So one of the things, old plastic surgery was, okay, let's make something too small or empty, let's make it bigger. Something that's sagging, let's tighten it. And those things are still very much a foundation of cosmetic improvement. But on top of that, it's important to address the actual structure of the skin and the structure of the sort of the subcutaneous tissues. And some of that is where medicines for the skin come in. Some of that's where lasers and radio frequency and energy come in. But also, in addition, there's an opportunity to boost the physiology of the skin with energy, but also with sort of regenerative medicine. So harnessing things like the regenerative power of our own plasma, or of our own elements related to stem cells. And I've got to be careful and not say stem cells themselves, but there are biological elements that we can now harness that can absolutely help us look better, but also improve our actual structure. That there are a lot of more traditional practitioners that ignore these things, and so there's a better way to sort of help ourselves.
And so some of those procedures might even, if you were considering getting a facelift, they would improve the skin quality, they could.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so they would only benefit
Yes,
you,
exactly.
so
Yeah,
it wouldn't be, even if you did that, what I'm hearing you say is that even if you did do microneedling or one of, some kind of collagen
yeah,
stimulating process, it would
yeah,
only make it your skin better if you, and then if you did a facelift, it would just make
yeah.
that even better.
Yeah, yeah, generally speaking, yes. And usually the best approach is we combine all of these things, because ultimately we want to break down the elements that are causing us to look older, and we're going to sort of treat and repair and rejuvenate all of those elements together.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And what about retinol? You talked about medicines. What about
yeah,
using retinol? Is that
yeah.
something you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it has a very long track record of helping to make the skin just improve the texture and the appearance. I do think there are some better products that are more advanced than retinol that will do some of the same things, but with a little bit less side effect, because retinol, wonderful, but a lot of people get irritated skin. And so there are some alternative, more advanced formulations that will still do the turning over the cells, but also create less irritation.
Hmm.
And that's a whole nother topic. There are lots of different products, but absolutely the medicines really can make a big difference. What I tell my patients, if we have the right regimen for your skin type, 80% of people, if they get in the right regimen after 3 months, will see that their skin looks visibly sort of better.
Wow.
you
And
know
I used retinol and it didn't cause any redness or anything. Does that mean it's not working well, or that I need a higher dose? Or,
No, so first thing it means, count your blessings, because not everybody gets irritated, and obviously nobody wants to be irritated.
right,
Um, but then second, what it does it mean? It means possibly that a higher concentration, it's possible you could get a little bit more benefit from it. But I'd say in general, count your blessings.
oh, okay. Yeah, I just put it on and I was waiting for my skin, my face to go beet red and flake. And, I actually avoided using it for a long time because I had heard about the side effects. And then I put it on and I was like, wait a minute, nothing's happening. So I was wondering if it was even working. That's great. That's good to know. So tell me, Dr. Larry, what makes your approach different? What makes your tell me about your personal theories and approaches and
Sure.
yeah,
That's a fun question. I'm glad you asked it, and there are lots of levels I could answer it. But the first place I'll start is, in my field, everybody's focused on improving people's appearance, and obviously that is incredibly important. It's impactful, and I personally have experienced the transformation that it can bring you. But first and foremost, I actually believe that's only half the equation. I think there's a very big opportunity to not just improve our outer appearance, what I call our outer beauty, but also to improve our inner beauty. And that includes improving our physiology and our health. That improves improving sort of our weight management. That means improving our wellness, but also means improving our sort of our minds and our spirits. I've seen a lot of patients where they get the cosmetic work and it definitely helps improve them, but there's a group of people where there's still something missing. And that missing part is often the inner work of, there are even patients where they look absolutely amazing from a physical beauty standpoint, but they don't feel beautiful, or they feel insecure. And I even have this joke, I think, the supermodels are some of the most insecure people in the world. And it's because of the inner work. And so I think it's important to, so I actually, with the people who have a desire to do this, I actually help work with people on their inside. So first, they're improving their hormones and sort of their immune systems and sort of helping them lose weight. And this is through real medical treatment. Also with helping people work sort of on their mindset and their beliefs and how they look at themselves and how they live their lives. And ultimately we all want to sort of look in the mirror and feel good about what we see, but we also deserve and need to live with connection and with with contribution, and also with growth. And and those things are all things we can benefit from. And I'm a big believer in those things.
yeah, I realized after I met my husband that my physical appearance, as long as he finds me beautiful, for me, that's it. That's really what it's for, is
Yeah.
that my partner just finds me beautiful, and and that makes me feel beautiful. I'm not objective about my own looks. I don't think we are. I wanted to ask you, what I was going to say to you was, regarding the inner beauty, which
Yeah.
I love that you address that. And I think it's so incredible that your work is not just about, here's another woman, how much can I charge her? Let's get her, because there's people, let's face it, there are all
Yeah.
kinds of doctors who, are there to make money, and we all need to keep our businesses alive. That's just how it goes. But there's also people who operate out of integrity, and where that they have your best interest at heart. And that's the kind of plastic surgeon I would want to go see, is not just the person that was sitting there, going, okay, this is how much it is, and we can do this and this and this and this. because I've seen those people too. I will
Yeah.
add one thing about the inner work. I work on helping women find love and partnership. And what we see, Dr. Larry, is we do Zoom calls with our clients twice a week. And what we
Mhm.
see is how they transform visually in front of our eyes. And I call my course, my work, the world's cheapest facelift, because as these women start blossoming and coming back to life, and this dark cloud, of being single and feeling stigmatized, and finally finding their power with men, and how, they literally look 10 to 15 years younger
Yeah.
at the end of 12 weeks. So to your point, it's really both the inner and outer
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
It's not one without the other.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I completely agree with that. And I'm not surprised at all to hear those transformations amongst your own clients. And I see them with our patients too, that, there are a lot of women that, maybe they were born a certain way and it was always made them feel self-conscious. And I'm amazed after they have their enhancement, they come back and they are standing so much taller. And it's when you sort of combine the two,
Mhm.
the outer and the inner, that's when we really, really shine.
Yeah. And I think one without the other doesn't really work. You can keep, like,
Yeah.
that's where you get the women who keep chasing that
Yeah.
elusive beauty, where they're thinking, okay, if I just do this procedure,
Yeah.
I'll be happy. Or if I just do that procedure,
Yeah.
I'll be happy. And I'm sure you've seen those women who are never going to be happy.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, gosh, a whole other, complex topic, but it is true that we all want to sort of look young forever. And unfortunately, if we're lucky enough to even make it there, that, father time always wins. But at the same time, with the right self-care, we can probably prevent about 50% of aging, which means we can age much more gracefully with how we look, but how we feel, how much energy we have. And I encourage everyone, if it's important to them, to take care of themselves. And sometimes on the cosmetic side, certainly, like, we all get sold this idea of an easy button. There's always an ad for, like, oh, this miracle product is going to make you look 5 years younger, be the solution to all your needs. And yet so many of us have tried some of these things and realized, okay, maybe it didn't really work the way it was advertised, but we keep getting another one and, like, oh, a friend told me about this. And sometimes we put off taking care of ourselves because we're hoping for, like, the easy button, or we're hoping for the miracle. And unfortunately, that typically doesn't really exist. And so sometimes we have to realize, you know what, I've got to think about doing something that maybe makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but it really is ultimately what's going to be best for me. And that's something else that we all need to sort of recognize.
Dr. Larry, I could keep talking to you. You have such, it truly, I mean, it's so important that people bring such integrity to their work, and that it's not just something, again, that we do to make a living, but that we really are not just changing faces, but changing lives, out
Yeah.
from the outside in and from the inside out. So how do people find you? I know you're in San Francisco. I'm
Yeah.
guessing people even come from, all over to
Yeah.
work with you because of your wonderful reputation, and knowing that they'll be in such good hands. So how would the women listening find you?
So people can easily find the easiest way is visit us at our website, www.77plasticsurgery.com. So my practice name is 77 Plastic Surgery. It's named after the beauty and diversity in San Francisco. So San Francisco is a 7 by 7 mile square. And then it turns out our actual physical location, at least right now, it's at an address called 77 Van Ness Avenue. So that's why we're named 77 Plastic Surgery. So the website's the easiest way. You can also find us on Instagram at Dr. DR415, also to represent San Francisco as well.
And are there samples of your work that they can see on your
Yeah.
Instagram? Oh,
Yeah.
great. Can't wait. I'm hopping over there too. I should have seen it before we did the podcast, but I will look forward to doing more research. And I will spread the word. Dr. Larry, this has been such a pleasure. And I thank you so much for your time. And hopefully we can do it again. Maybe even
Yeah.
have some questions from listeners and all. And I'm sure that people have lots of questions that I didn't think to ask. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Lisa.
thank you.
Um, and I'd love to talk again. It's great to talk with you.
Thank you so much. And I'm Lisa Shield. This has been Finding the Guardian of Your Soul. You can find me by going to lisashield.com. You will find a button all over my website that you can click to take you to view my free 45-minute presentation. If you like what you hear, stay to the end, because that's where you can book a call with a member of my team to find out how we can help you find the guardian of your soul. Also, please rate and like this podcast. And be honest, we really want to hear your authentic thoughts. If you don't like us, let us know how we can improve. And if you do, well, then we want to hear what we're doing right as well. And finally, you can send your ideas for future topics to podcast@lisashield.com. Thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Larry. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Right. Thanks, everybody.
Ah.